This is posturing. So you can go to your Republican base because they're right now, they're mad. They didn't want anything going to Ukraine. But what he can say now is, hey, it ain't American money. Actually, we're making money off this. You remember that in what they did in the past. The Ukrainians saying, no, all this money, it doesn't go to Ukraine. It goes to the defense industry that builds it. But that was still taxpayer money being used to do this. There ain't no taxpayer money being used to go to Ukraine. We're just building weapons and selling them to the Europeans. But this is like saying you want to buy the most exotic sports car in the world, and they can produce them at 4 a year, and there's a waiting list of 150. You ain't never going to get the exotic sports car. These Patriot missiles will never show up in Ukraine. The Russians are just going to put the pedal to the metal. In the next 50 days, rather than the Russians slowing things down, I think you're going to see Russia pounding. Any shipment that makes its way into Ukraine will be destroyed as soon as possible. Look at all the drones that are coming in. They're pounding warehouses. They're pounding factories, anything. The totality of Ukraine's defense industry infrastructure is being wasted. Everything that comes in is being destroyed. Hardly any of it's getting to the front lines. Now, how do you sell this BS to the Ukrainian people? You put on a TV show. You can laugh about it and say, how foolish are they? There was a period of time where Martin Sheen, who played an American president in a TV series called The West Wing, he was mulling a run for the presidency. Why? Because every American who saw Martin Sheen went, he's the president of the United States. Because they watched the TV show and they believed it. That's half the battle here, perception. He's perceived as a leader. And Zelensky was able to say, I played a president on TV, therefore I can be the president. I'm believable. And he was going back and he basically regurgitated to the Ukrainian people the same spiel that he gave on the TV series about corruption. We need to do this. I believe in peace, all this kind of stuff. He didn't believe any of that. He's a cocaine snorting homosexual deviant. That is him. Now, that doesn't mean that all homosexuals are deviants, but he is. He is a deviant. He lived a lifestyle that would have made cabaret performers in Berlin in the 1920s and early 30s blush. He's not a good person. He's a very bad person as a human being, his heart. But he's a convincing actor, a convincing performer. And the British and the Ukrainians were able to convert this guy into a symbol, and he became the president of Ukraine. First of all, the U.S. doesn't have enough quality intelligence to know what the hell's going on inside Russia and Iran in terms of their relations. But maybe the Israelis do. Still have to give the Israelis credit. They had a hell of an intelligence game plan in play. And it's something the Iranians, I would imagine, are trying to clean up before round 2 starts. Oh, we showed them Nazis. We didn't show them anything. The Nuremberg trials were a setup. It was a con. But yeah, they did the high-profile trials of the big Nazi leaders. When it came to the generals, they whitewashed the whole thing. And it was done led by Donovan, who was the head of the OSS, precursor to the CIA, working with John McCloy, Truman's handpicked German overseer, Dwight D. Eisenhower. They made a decision from the start to whitewash the Nazi crimes of the Wehrmacht. One of the first things that happened after the German generals were captured is they were tasked by Donovan, who was the head of the OSS, to write their history, but write it the way they want the world to perceive the German army as a good army. And they used that to color the defense in the Nuremberg trials. Seidel, who ended up being the first German general to become commander in the new expanded NATO in 1955, 10 years after he was a Nazi. He was put on trial along with 20 other generals, and they were found guilty of war crimes, killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians in Norway, in Greece, in France, and all the occupied zones. He, Seidel, was responsible, found guilty, sentenced to 20 years, didn't serve a day. Why? Because he, along with the others, whitewashed their history. Another report that said Donald Trump was considering providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. And the Russians have come out and wisely said that we've seen reports like these before, and they've almost always turned out to be lies. I can't imagine any scenario where the President of the United States, having been briefed appropriately by his intelligence community, would ask Zelensky if he could strike Moscow, knowing what the consequences of that would be. Except that this president is pretty stupid. I get off the phone with Vladimir Putin, and he's talking all nice to me, but then he goes around and he bombs Ukraine. Why, Donnie baby? Why? Engage 3 brain cells in that orange-colored face of yours. Because you had them attack Russian strategic resources. What did you think was going to happen? Donald Trump lives in this imaginary fake world where the one I also love is when he said, I had a good phone call with Vladimir Putin. And Melania says, He bombed another city last night. Oh, he's a bad man. Really? Is this where we're at? No way. Way. Okay, that's literally a quote from the president. No way. According to him, that's what Vladimir Putin told him. No way. You're not going to bomb Moscow. Way, Donald Trump said, as if this is a frat party. But that's the fantasy world that Donald Trump lives in. I don't believe these conversations took place. Netanyahu is Netanyahu, supported by the right-wing Zionists, etc. But he's an Israeli leader. Zelensky is a manufactured event. He's not a leader. He's an actor, literally an actor, a comedian turned actor. Let me remind the audience, what brought him into national forefront was the fact that he starred in a TV show called Servant of the People. It's a cute little show. I saw it. I thought it was pretty funny, where he plays a teacher, an everyman, who goes off on a spiel. Somebody records, he goes on the internet, and then he becomes the president of Ukraine. And his job is to do good things for the Ukrainians. And then I think after season 2 or 3, the shortened season 3, he suddenly became the president of Ukraine. Because Kolomoisky, the guy who supported this, the guy who ran the media thing that picked this, made this happen, who was working with the British who picked this was a MI6 operation from the start. British intelligence, together with the CIA, needed to get rid of they couldn't have Poroshenko continuing to front because he's a corrupt oligarch and all that. So the oligarch said, we're going to pick a fresh face. The first thing we have to recognize is that this solidifies the reality that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about peace or a damn about lives in Ukraine. So let's stop the fiction. You had Scott Jennings, the Republican apologist on CNN, out there saying, Donald Trump, he's the only one out there that when he talks about war and peace, it's peace first, peace, then war. I'm like, no, it's not, you idiot. Donald Trump doesn't know what he wants, in terms of geopolitical alignments. Donald Trump wants his ego massaged. Donald Trump wants to be seen as somebody who matters, somebody who counts. But when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, given the posture he's taken, he doesn't matter and he doesn't count. And Ryabkov made this point clear. There will be no ultimatums. And what Trump is doing is an ultimatum. It's a joke. 50 days? What, the Russians are supposed to go out and buy diapers because they have to change their diapers every day because of fear of Donald Trump's 50-day statement? Sanctions? You're going to sanction Russia? I guess they're talking about sanctioning the supporters of Russia who buy the Russian energy and the Russian oil, do trade with Russia. Let's see, China. I think Trump just fixed the biggest mistake he ever made about China, which was to impose sanctions on tariffs on China in April. China didn't blink. The Russians are very legally minded. For them to have any agreement with Ukraine requires legitimacy on the part of the people participating in the process. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that Vladimir Putin is the president of Russia. There is no doubt that anybody he appoints under him to do a job, has the authority of the Russian government behind them. Zelensky is not the legitimate president of Ukraine. Hasn't been for some time now, constitutionally. Can't do it. And I know the West sits there and rewrites, it's a war. It doesn't say that in the Constitution. The fact is, right now, the leader of Ukraine constitutionally is the Speaker of the Parliament. That's who the Russians are saying, we'll do business with that person. But what we prefer is that you have new elections and you guys pick somebody who then can sit down and sign the document of surrender. But it ain't going to be Zelensky because he's not in a position to surrender anything. And that's the reality. And this is the reality of the whole government that he's built around them. It's the most corrupt edifice in the world. It doesn't represent Ukraine. It doesn't represent the Ukrainian people, Ukrainian nation. It only represents their own individual corrupt interests. So we can't compare Zelensky with Netanyahu at all, except that they're both scumbags. They can never again be allowed to have access to industry because this is going to happen. Everything that's happening right now was predicted back then because the Germans are a sick society. There's something wrong with the Germans fundamentally. Tell me I'm wrong. Listen to their statements. The fact that you have a German chancellor and a German defense minister making these statements and the millions of Germans aren't in the streets saying, never again, not in our name, that will not happen. Instead, they sit there like the compliant good Germans there. Oh, we don't know what to do, but our arms keep twitching because we want to do something, but we don't know what we want to do. You know what you want to do because you're all Nazis at heart. Scratch a German, get a Nazi. This is the fact. Just it's playing out in front of us. Playing out in front of us. But Pistorius and Mertz, they're trying to create something, this Fourth Reich, and it should scare the hell out of everybody. It should scare the hell out of the Americans. It's not just the Russians that paid a price. We went to war against them too. Yes, we are to blame for the rise of the Fourth Reich. We're the ones that worked with the Germans. Study the history at the end of World War II and what happened to the Wehrmacht. And study what happened to the generals. Everybody talks about the Nuremberg trials. Nuremberg trials, if they did take place, I would have a hard time seeing responsible people allowing it to be manifested because we know what the outcome will be. Okay, Russia is just begging for an excuse to unveil Brezhnev in its full glory. Remember what Vladimir Putin said, that what makes Brezhnev especially destructive is the concentration of heat-based explosive destruction that can be done when you concentrate them. If you take a look, the Brezhnev hit here. Now, could you imagine all of the Brezhnev submunitions hitting in the one place? The destruction would be the equivalent of a nuclear bomb. And now imagine a dozen Brezhnevs being fired. Guys, we need to stop listening to the Financial Times. We need to stop listening to any of these ridiculous media outlets. If they don't name a source, it's probably not an accurate report, especially when you're talking about extreme policies of this. Because even Donald Trump, in his ego-addled brain, isn't stupid enough to believe that Ukraine could actually get away with that. If they could implement this, Israel stops being this parasite that can only exist by sucking the lifeblood out of America and Europe. And Israel is on the path of becoming actually a viable entity, the central entity, the glue that holds the Middle East together. That was the plan. And then it collapsed. And now we have this disaster taking place. And so I believe they spent a lot of time talking about how they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again, because this plan of the India Middle East Economic Corridor, the Abrams Accord, that's Humpty Dumpty. He sat on a wall, but he had a great fall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And Trump is talking about how we can do that. We get the super glue, put it in, but things have to happen. So I think those are the three things: saving Bibi's political butt, resolving Iran Hezbollah, and how to get Humpty Dumpty put back together again. And I remember talking to the Israelis, they said this fundamentally will change everything because it's going to change the political dynamic of Israel. It's going to stack the demographics in favor of Netanyahu's Likud party with people who don't understand the Palestinians, who hate the Palestinians. They'll be seeking to impose a very strict Zionist approach on this. Is people are going to spit on my dead body? That's what's going to happen? Yep, that's exactly what's going to happen to you, Zelensky, because you're nothing. You're nothing. You're a throwaway talent that's lost his utility. You're the guy, you're the character in a show that the show's still popular. Believe me, the war in Ukraine's popular. Look at the Germans. They need it. They need the war in Ukraine. But they don't need Zelensky. He's a problem. So you know what happens? Showrunners just meet at the end of the series and they go, what are we going to do next season? What we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the president because nobody likes him anymore. He's not a convincing character, and we're going to write him off. Meanwhile, the actor's sitting there running around as if he's got the next season coming up and he's going to be the big star. And then they show him the script and he goes, you're dead. What? I don't want to die. That's Zelensky. Let's stop talking about Zelensky as if he's a leader of anything. The Russians don't recognize him as a leader. They won't even do business with him. They say, we'll meet with him. We'll meet with an actor. President Putin meets with anybody who wants to shake his hand. Not anybody, but he meets with a lot of people. That doesn't mean that he's going to sign a business relationship with them. Or the weapon systems. 17 what? Batteries. Full complement. Holy cow, Donnie, baby. Where are you getting them? Germany? They got 12. They ain't giving them up. They might give one or two up. They've already given two up, but they've been blown away. Let's see. Spain could give up some, but they don't have that many to begin with. Give up one. The Netherlands, give up another one. Yeah, we're up to 4. And they're not going to happen overnight. Germany's not going to provide any transit support until they get new stuff in. And the Americans ain't building new stuff. And if they are, it's going to Israel or to replenish American stocks. This is not happening. Donald Trump is there shaking the hands with Ritter. And the other thing is, look at the arrangement. How stupid does Ritter have to be? To believe this stuff. But here's Donald Trump's thing. Hey, Mark, you're going to give up all your weapons to Ukraine. You. And then you're going to buy them from us. And we're not going to spend a penny. If I were Ritter, I would have looked there and said, Donnie, baby, stick it in your ear. You know what? Why don't you go? We've already drafted it up for you. It's a document. Sign it. Get the hell out of NATO. We don't need you. We don't want you. You're useless to us. You mean nothing to us. Because this isn't serious. This isn't serious at all. This is a joke. Tim Weiner's, he's not to be trusted on any of this. I've known Tim Weiner for a long time. He is the equivalent of a CIA historian, even though he doesn't work for the CIA. His job is to spin everything to the favor of the CIA. When I resigned as a weapons inspector in Iraq, having spent 7 years working intimately with the CIA at every level on the issue of Iraq and WMD, he was one of the people tasked with countering what I was saying. And I just despise the man because I know what I know and how I know it. And I know that when he starts talking about things that I was intimately involved in countering it, I know who his sources are. He's not a legitimate journalist. He's not a legitimate historian. He might as well be on the payroll of the CIA. He was that way with Iraq and WMD, and he's that way on this story right now. He's giving you the CIA approved narrative, which is designed to do two things: spin things in a way that puts the CIA in a good light, and then shape public perceptions. Let me make the following observation about the CIA. Anytime you have somebody talking about the CIA officially and acting as if they have sources in the CIA does not function. It's not designed to function in the sunlight. It's not how the CIA operates. The CIA is all about lies, deceit, deception. Hell, you had Mike Pompeo brag about it, if you remember, when he was the director of the CIA. This is the reality, and it's just going to get worse for Ukraine. Every time Great Britain or France or somebody signs a drone deal and they say we're going to increase the drone production capability, gets targeted and taken out. This is the reality of Ukraine. And for Donald Trump to sit there and shove nonsense down our throat, I want to save lives. All you did is condemn even more Ukrainians to die. Yes, some Russians will die too, but not nearly in the numbers that you think they are. There is no leverage over Russia right now. You just look like the fool you are. The other thing is, if I were Taiwan, everybody else looking at this, I'd say this man's a nut. He can't be trusted. He's not serious. It's all posturing. It's all about him, but it's not about real security, real outcomes. It's this. As an American, I am humiliated by the president's behavior. So if you have somebody coming out saying, my sources in the CIA say this, stop, finish. Because the only reason they're talking to you is because they're trying to achieve a propaganda aspect here, an information operation against the American public. The CIA will never tell the truth. Doesn't mean the truth can't be found out, but the CIA is incapable of telling the truth. They're not designed to tell the truth, especially about covert operations. They're covert for a reason, deniability. So when the CIA speaks, it's because there's a need to speak, to shape the perception, to take you away from the direction they want. Go the exact opposite direction of what Weiner said. That's the reality. He's shaping something, trying to create something, because they don't want you looking here. They want you over here. And that's all I have to say about Tim Weiner. He's a disgusting journalist. He's not a journalist. He's a CIA hack. And his job is to work with the CIA to deflect public attention away from where it needs to be focused. Because the Russians aren't playing your stupid game. Let me remind everybody, Donald Trump started this war. He tries to blame it on Joe Biden, but Donald Trump started this war. All of the policies that are in place that led to the events of February 2022 were put in place by Donald J. Trump. And the Russians know this. Now, the Russians, of course, being the mature, diplomatic, mature nation that they are, will have the door open to diplomacy. And it's better for Russia to talk to the United States than not talk. And so no matter how unpredictable and outrageous Donald Trump is, come on, even outrageous. What do you think the Russians think about Donald Trump's leaked 2024 campaign where he told Vladimir Putin that I will bomb the you-know-what, bovine excrement out of Moscow if Putin moves into Kiev? Hey, the statement was never made. So Donald Trump's a liar, and the Russians are just like, who is this man-child? And that's how they're treating this. What threat is here? The threat of sanctions, I already told you, that will never come to play. First of all, Russia could care less about sanctions, and the big partners out there, they're not gonna yield either, because that's the end of them. That's the end of them as being relevant. And if they come together, their combined impact on the American economy, Trump will never do this. He'll never pull the trigger on this. So I don't think the benefit of the United States factors into anything Donald Trump does. I think he is, how do I get the Nobel Peace Prize? And I hate to say this, but it really comes down to that. This is all about him posturing himself to be seen as the great peacemaker. It's not about real deals. Look at the fine print of the U.S. Ukrainian rare earth mineral deal. It's not a deal. It's fake. That's supposed to benefit the United States? No, it doesn't. It humiliates America. Nothing he does benefits the United States. Everything he does humiliates us and makes matters worse. It's all about posturing Donald J. Trump as the greatest thing on the world. He's a snake oil salesman. He's a grifter. He's a con artist. He's not the president of the United States. He is in name, but the function, he doesn't do anything to benefit the United States. Nothing. Everything is done to make his image look good. Look at his whole tariff policy. We're not, you have to laugh at Besson. We're going to get $100 billion. You haven't collected that money, Scott Besson, you haven't collected that money. This is just smoke and mirrors. Everything he does is smoke and mirrors. There's no substance to it. There's no reality to it. And it's all a grift. Look at Pete Hegseth coming out with his drone policy. We're going to have drone dominance. No, you're not. But it's cute. You got to play Metallica.